The only question the individual running the event said was, well, does she have a book? The answer was yes, and I got the gig. No sales required in order to open that door. So they are very powerful to get your foot in the door, but also to share your message with people.
Today's episode is an absolute page turner. We're joined by the incredible Susan Crossman, who's here to guide us on our journey from CEO to author extraordinaire. Brace yourself for a crash course on book writing, including AI-powered book writing tips and book writing mastery, and then some. Susan works with coaches, thought leaders, and innovators to write high-quality non-fiction books to help them share their message, enhance their credibility, and generate greater revenue through public speaking and other business initiatives. This is a great way for you to stand out from the competition. With decades of top-tier experience as a professional writer, an author, editor, and content manager, Susan brings a high level of organization and a powerful layer of excellence to the projects her business undertakes. She and her team, they work with people who are making a difference in the world. Their clients look beyond the parameters of what is supposed to be to the realm of endless possibility. And Susan and her team are devoted to the old-fashioned idea, which to me is not so old-fashioned, of serving their clients while coaching them to best practices in the creation of a brighter world. That's what they do. Incredible, right? So grab your pen and notepad and get ready to learn about navigating the world of book writing like the true boss that you are. It is absolutely amazing to have you on the show. I'm so excited that you're here. You're very welcome.
Oh, Deidre, thank you. I'm excited to be here as well. I'm just so happy to be speaking with you and your audience and excited as I'll get out about books.
Oh, amazing. And I'm such a bookworm at the moment. What am I reading at the moment? I've got two books on the go because I'm listening to something on Audible, which is Seth Godin's book, All Marketers Are Liars. That's what I'm listening to. And I'm reading, what am I reading at the moment? I've just started a new book. It's called Growth Hacking. I can't think who the author is now, but I just started that one. So there you go. That's two books on the go.
Two at once is a serious reader for sure. I was just going to ask, are you also the kind of person with a stack of books by your bedside table waiting to be read?
No, I'm the type of
No.
person with a Kindle who has a
Ah,
book list ready to go.
gotcha.
Absolutely. So, Susan, I brought you on here because I know how incredible you are in terms of being a multi times author, both traditional and non-traditionally published. And so what I really want to talk about is how professional service providers could potentially get their brand more known or position themselves as an expert by doing something like you have, but maybe just starting with one book. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, for sure, Deidre. A book is an incredible advantage to a business person, generally, an entrepreneur in particular, in getting your message out, your philosophy, the way you do business, how you're different maybe than other people in your niche. And it is a lot of work to write a quality book, but once you have that book written, it's something that you can use in numerous ways to support your business. For example, I do a lot of speaking. I love speaking. And there have been speaking appointments that I've had just because I had a book. The only question the individual running the event said was, well, does she have a book? The answer was yes, and I got the gig. No sales required in order to open that door. So they are very powerful to get your foot in the door, but also to share your message with people.
That's amazing. And I think maybe I've heard you say, or maybe I haven't, and I'm dreaming I have, but have you said, or do you believe that there's a book in everyone?
Yeah, I think there is. Everybody has a raft of stories available to them. When you think back to over your life, everything that has ever happened to you has helped create of you the perfect funnel through which a book could flow. All of your experiences. You've got so many stories tucked away in your back pocket of things that have happened to you that have affected your business, for one thing, and also have had an impact on the message that you have to share with your target audience, the people that you're here to serve. So, yeah, I truly do believe that. The interesting thing is the statistics tell us that about 80% of the population has thought about writing a book. So even people who, are kind of mildly interested, the thought has crossed their mind that they might want to write a book. Of that 80%, about 40% sit down and start to write a book. And of that 40%, only about 2% finish. So it's interesting. It's something a lot of us have wanted to do, but very few people actually get around to finishing.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh, those statistics are incredible. And so let's marry those statistics back with the point that you made a moment ago about, does she have a book? So let's say for those who do, percentage wise, who do have a book, what other ways can having a published book help with building that credibility?
Well, for sure, it's huge in the speaking world. And if you do have aspirations to do a lot more speaking, then if you don't have a book, it may well be holding you back. A lot of event organizers almost require a speaker to have the credibility of a book. So that's number one. But also, even just among your basic clientele, people are enormously impressed when you tell them you've written a book. It's something, I think it's because so many people have thought about doing it and didn't get there, that when someone has shown up with the success of a book behind them, then it is something that we are truly impressed by. And even that word author carries the word authority with it. It's the root of the word authority. And so I think we in our society, we have learned that if someone's written a book, that means they are an authority automatically without even thinking about it. We have a lot of respect for those people. So I think in terms of doing more business with the people that you're here to serve, it really does ensure that you are seen as an authority, which, it is a really big deal from a business perspective, to be able to claim authority in that field. And I think those are two of the really biggest ones. Even among one's peers, it is kind of impressive to be able to say that you've written a book as well. It elevates you in your field among your peers as well. So.
Amazing. And oh my gosh, I'm like, how did I never think that the word author is part of the word authority?
Well, and it's such a lot of work too. I think in this digital world where it's possible to write yourself a book and get it up on Amazon perceptively very quickly, people have come to think that it's easy to do until you sit down to do it. And I think that's what we're learning as the digital world evolves a little bit more, that it's actually a lot of work to write a book. And so once people sit down to try and do it, that 80% of the population that has thought about writing a book, and then you have that 40% who sit down to do it, but only 2% of those people finish. I mean, the reason people don't finish is because it is a lot of work to write a quality book that reflects you well. And I think that's something that I would add to our conversation about the credibility piece. If you write a lousy book, that's not going to add to your reputation. If you write a quality book, it is going to enhance your reputation. And so there needs to be also a focus on writing the best book that you are capable of writing. And quite often that means getting help with it. Just because it's a big project, there are lots of programs out there that help people write books. I just finished running a workshop in England, actually on the weekend, with a colleague who is an expert in AI. And this is a huge help to people who want to write a book but aren't really sure how to get started. There are some AI opportunities available quite inexpensively that can help people get started. It's only part of the answer. An AI written book is nowhere near what it needs to be, but at least it helps people get started. And still, a lot of work needs to go into that book once you've got the basis of it done. So it's really quite a lot of work. There are a lot of choice points. It's quite complex to write and publish a book, a lot of things to know. But to the point when you get that book done and you have a book you're proud of, it will do amazing things for your life.
Oh my God, definitely. And I know even as a co-author in a book, because that's what I did, I just co-authored one chapter and I thought, oh my God, how am I going to write one whole chapter? But actually, once I did some research, it all sort of flowed. But Susan, let's imagine then that I'm about to start to write a book, and this book that's in me, I can feel it building already. What would you say are the main starting points or the key things that people need to know so that they can extract that value inside of them and start to share it with the world?
Sure. Great question, actually, because a lot of people aren't sure where to start or how to start. And I recommend everybody be very clear on why you're doing it. Start with why, as Simon Sinek has told us. Why are you writing your book? Is it to create a revenue stream? Is it to support your business? Is it to leave a legacy? Is it to share your message? Those are, I mean, that's only 4 reasons why people typically will write a book. There are many others. But if you're really clear on why you write that book, then every choice point along the way can contribute to that goal. So, for example, if you want to create a revenue stream of your book, well, most people don't make a lot of money out of their books. As a traditionally published author, I get $2, which in Canadian dollars. So I'm not sure what the conversion rate is now for the pound, but not a lot of money for every book that sells. So that's not a revenue stream. However, people who go straight to Amazon and create a number of ancillary projects around that, for example, a workbook, that can be a much better revenue stream for what they're going to do. Traditional publishing is very hard to crack into. And so, if prestige is an issue for you and you really want to have a prestigious reputation around your book writing, then perhaps start pursuing a traditional publishing model, which, so again, back to your why, well, prestige is important, then the traditional model might be more valuable. And
And
that
can I just
filters out
ask,
into marketing.
sorry, Susan, for interrupting,
Yeah.
but just to
Mhm.
clarify for listeners, in case they're not sure, what is traditional publishing? You might just elaborate on that just in case.
Yeah, sure. There are 4 basic models of publishing available to people today. Traditional model is what we tend to think of when we think of publishing. It's what's been predominant for 200 years, probably. There have been a lot of changes in the traditional model over the years. So now it means that a company will publish your book for you. You give up the rights to the content. So you're licensing the rights to the traditional company, but they will pay for everything. They will look after the distribution. They will get the book up on Amazon for you and probably a number of other online sites as well. They'll create the ebook, not typically the audiobook, although some companies will do that depending on the platform of the author. They look after everything, and you usually will get a nice little advance. They call it a check. It can range, I get about $1,000 Canadian, which is not a lot of money, but I appreciate that. And I have clients who've generated as much as 50 or $60,000 as in an advance, but you have to pay that back before you get your royalties. So you have to sell a lot of books in order to get that ongoing royalty check back from a traditional company. So it's a beautiful model because it's very easy for the author and you might make a little cash on top of all that. However, it's very competitive. Of course, because you're being paid basically for your content to write that book, lots of people would like that model, plus the prestige that it carries because it's so competitive. I talked to one agent last year who said, okay, so that's the other piece about traditional publishing. Most people don't just walk into a publishing company and say, here's my manuscript. I bet you want to publish it. There are gatekeepers called agents who will introduce you to a number of publishing companies in the effort to find one that would like to publish you. So you have to land an agent before you land a publishing contract. And the agents are getting up to 100 or 200 unsolicited manuscripts every week. So the agent has to filter through all of those manuscripts to find one that they can sell to a publishing house. The agent only gets paid if you make a contract, get a contract. So, they're quite interested in the best manuscripts they can find that they can work with. So it can take up to 10 years, is what I'm hearing. Yeah, because
Wow.
it's so competitive. Yeah, 2 to 4 years to get an agent. and then another 2 to 4 years to get a contract. And then once you have a signed contract with a publishing house, then it's about 18 months to 2 years before that book comes out. So it's a slow boat to China. And actually, to be honest, Deidre, most entrepreneurs do not have 8 to 10 years to publish a book and get it out there. We need to move a little faster than that.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's an incredible amount of time. I never realized that it would take
Yeah.
that long. So
Yeah.
going,
It doesn't have to, but I mean, this is what an agent has told me is that's the deal right now. That's how it's working. And yeah, it's
okay.
tough.
Wow. Okay. So I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I think that was really important question to ask in case people are listening going, what exactly is traditional publishing? So now you know, and it certainly sounds like it definitely has that bit more prestige along with it. Okay, so going back to the question I asked, if I can remember what it was now, I think it was kind of where does someone start if they're planning to write a book? So you'd said start with why. That was number one.
Sure. Yeah. Start with why, figure out why you're doing it so that you can be very clear on everything you do along the way. I think that's, it's important in business, no matter what you're doing, is to be clear on why you're doing something. And that's important. And then I would get very clear on what it is you want to communicate to your readers. What's your message? What do you want to share? And quite often, if you have workshops that you run or training programs of some sort, you can align your book with that material. And actually, that's a smart thing to do because then you can just repurpose existing material into the book. So that's kind of an easy way to get the book written is to use your pre-existing content. Not all of us have that, but knowing why or what you're writing about is really important and who your audience is. And Deidre, you, of all people, understand the importance of audience. Who is my target audience? Who am I writing this book for? And I even recommend that people be very clear on an avatar. Create an avatar for your ideal reader and know who that is that's going to pick up that book and say, oh, I have been waiting for this book forever. I can't believe I finally found this book. There are people out there like that, just as in business. Same thing with your book. There's somebody out there you're meant to serve. Who is it and what can you find out about them? So that when you're writing your book, you are directly focusing on your target audience, your target reader. So that I think is really important. Structure. So once you know what it is you're writing and why you're writing and who you're writing for, you do need structure. I work with a lot of very visionary people. They have magnificent ideas for what is possible for humanity, let alone for business. And unfortunately, that puts them out here. They're in the world of ideas, in the world of possibility. And it's very hard to go from here, where ideas are everywhere, to the granular level of detail that's required to write a book. And it's your structure for your book that will allow you to build that bridge between your ideas and your actual three-dimensional book. So the outline is really magical. It's the skeleton of your book, and then your writing puts the flesh on the bones. And there are lots of different ways to structure a book, to create an outline, but you do need one. And so that's another really important piece. I teach that. I have a 6-week course that I run, and that's a really important component of the 6-week course is book structure and what's the best structure for your book. So, and I'm not the only one who does this. There are lots of people out there who love book structure and can help you with that, but that's really important as well.
Amazing. Okay, so let me
Yeah.
summarize and have we captured it all? So start with why. Very important to understand why. Then what comes next? So what do you want to communicate? What's your message? And potentially what have you already created that you could repurpose into the book or take from what you create in the book and repurpose it to monetize it in other ways, like you said, with workbooks online and whatnot. And then number 3 was who. Who is my target audience? So your avatar or your persona, sometimes known as well. So who is the ideal reader for this book? And then number 4, structure. So the structure, and I loved what you said, it allows you to build a bridge between your ideas and this 3-dimensional book. I love that.
Yeah.
Is that the 4 steps, do you think, Susan?
Well, I would add a couple more actually. Deidre, I think number 5 would be making sure that you create the time to write. Everybody that I work with is extremely busy. One of the things that stops people quite often, in fact, from writing that book, from being stuck in the 80% rather than the 2%, is they don't think they have enough time to do it. They're busy people, families and businesses and, sandwich generation people and volunteer commitments and relationships. It all takes time. A book, you can count on needing, I usually say between 500 and 600 hours to write a book. So somehow you want to find 500 to 600 hours to write a book. And that might be 10 hours a week. It might be a weekend getaway once a month to a little cottage somewhere or somewhere, a hotel, even if you can afford that. But just to dedicate the time to doing that, you have to create the time. The time is not going to show up. You're never going to be less busy than you are now. We have this fantasy. I know when my kids were young, my first book, it took me 13 years to write my first book. It was a novel, and I was very discouraged that it was taking so long. But I had 5 children and stepchildren. We had 2 dogs. I had, family things, work, all kinds of reasons not to write a book. And it took 13 years. My fourth book, I was 6 months because by then I had figured out, okay, I have to get up at 4:30 in the morning and write till 6 in the morning. So I was creating an hour and a half a day, 6 days a week. I took Sundays off and I was able to get that book done in 6 months. I'm a little faster than most people. It takes me about 150 to 200 hours to write a book, but I've been writing professionally for decades. So I have a very strong skill set around writing books that most people who are writing their first book don't have. And that's something that I kind of ties in with the time, creating time, is that a lot of people are nervous about the quality of their writing and they're not sure they can do it. And so it's hard to find the time to begin with. However, if you're also feeling a little insecure about your writing, it's even harder to create the time to write that book. And so I really encourage people not to worry about the quality of their writing. Do the best job you can, but you can hire an editor, and I work as an editor to improve the quality of that book. So don't get too hung up on how perfect it has to be. It won't be. Once you're finished that first draft, it'll need a lot of work. And you can go over it yourself and get it as good as you can, which is, of course, you should do that. But you can also hire somebody. And I really recommend people do hire an editor after they're finished to make sure that it's as professional as it can possibly be. So
Amazing, amazing. And I think that's really powerful as well. And I know certainly, even when I was only sending off a chapter, Susan, I was so nervous about what was the feedback going to be from the editor about the chapter that I'd sent off. And because you do work so hard at it. So, what tips do you have for people who hire an editor like yourself and send their book in? You know, not to take what the feedback is so personally or to heart, or what do you say to people around it?
well, excuse me. First of all, I'd say it's not really about you. And that's where we get up in our ego it's our ego that is getting worried about the feedback. So the book isn't really about you. It's about the people you're here to serve. And so if you have not spent your entire career learning to be a better writer, please cut yourself some slack because you've been spending your entire career becoming brilliant at something else. I'm someone like me and other editors out there. This is what we do all day, every day. I work with words all day, every day. I have been doing that for more than 40 years. I have had so much editing in my own life. I know when I was young, my first job out of university was to work at a daily newspaper. And in professional writing circles, whether it's news, journalism, or government communications, corporate communications, marketing, you have editors. Even if you're a writer, you have people up the chain from you who are taking a look at what you're writing, and their job is to make it better. And so I learned very early on that there were people who could help me be better at what I do, better writers. I've been edited so much in my life. And so for me now, It's not about me. It's about ensuring that message is as clear as possible and as powerful as possible. And it takes a team to do that quite often. So, please don't worry about the quality of your writing. If that isn't what you've been doing for decades, let it go. It's okay that it isn't perfect, and it probably won't be. But that's why you have an editor. That editors love making sentences better. And it's not just the sentences. Quite often I find logical issues in a book when I'm editing that things don't quite always make sense. They make sense to you because you're connecting the dots in your head, but when someone else is looking at it, you may have forgotten things. That's not a judgment of you or how intelligent you are or anything. It's simply that this is a skill set that needs to be learned. And Deidre, if I can just carry on a little bit longer on that, I get really excited about this idea of a book writing skill set. Excuse me. When you're writing your first book, you do not have a book writing skill set in place. It's your first book. It's like riding a bicycle. That first time you ride a bicycle, your body doesn't know what to do. Your legs and your feet and your arms, and you've got to be scanning. I mean, that's a lot to be asking you to do. You just have not developed a skill set. You also don't have a neural network in place to support you in that. Same thing with writing a book. You've never done it before. So, of course, you don't have the neurology in place to support you, but also the skill set that will support you as well. And I find with my clients that first book is very much a learning book, learning how to develop that skill set. The second book is so much easier. And the third book is so much easier. And now I'm working on my sixth book. And it's not that I'm dashing it off, but I now have a pretty sophisticated skill set around writing books. So, of course, it's going to be a better book than the first book was. So, again, please cut yourself some slack. If you're working on that first book, understand that you will keep improving in what you're doing.
Oh my God. Book number 6 on the way, Susan. That's amazing. So exciting. I'm going to ask you more about that at the end because people can check out your existing books perhaps or learn about when the 6th one is coming out. Okay,
Sure.
so I have a question as well about maybe some of the common pitfalls that people experience when they start to write books. So what in your experience do people come to with maybe struggles or obstacles that they find in their way? I know you've talked about quality and time, but aside from those, what else crops up for people?
Imposter syndrome. That's the big one. Who am I to write a book? Who's going to read this book? I'm not the leader in the field. Why would anybody pick this book up? And I find that's actually a big one. It's something people struggle with quite a lot. And I feel that if you've been tapped on the shoulder by a book, then just lean in and make it the best book that you possibly can. You may not be the leader in the field, but you have different experiences than the leader in the field. And the book that you're going to write is going to be absolutely wonderful for its own reasons and for your audience. I had a client, an editing client, that was so devastated because she was at a family gathering and she had written her book and it was published. It was a really good book. And her uncle was there and he had read the book and she said, "Well, did you like my book?" And he said, "No, I didn't." And she was just horrified because he was a very blunt older gentleman. And she was telling me about this story. And I said, "Well, is your uncle in your target audience?" No, no, he wasn't. So being, again, back to being very aware of who your target audience is, the leaders in the field, in your field, may have a different target audience than you do, but they also have different information to share. You have your own subset of information to share. So don't worry about being an imposter. You're probably not. And then the other piece that I see a lot is I just think I'm a terrible writer. I'm an awful writer. I can never do this because I'm such a terrible writer. Often that will go back to grade 4. In Canada, we have grade 4, grade school, or the early years when you're maybe 8 to 13 years old, and you had that one teacher who might have been having a pretty bad day, took a look at what you'd written and said, "This is terrible. You have to do this all again. It's awful." And so people carry that with them, that illusion that they're terrible writers, when actually they may be pretty good, but just don't have an understanding of how good they really are. They feel terrible about their writing. So that again that's imaginary. That's not true. But we carry these stories along with us. So those are two pretty big ones that I see. And again, you're going to have an editor. Ideally, you want to hire an editor to improve what you've done and find ways to make it as good as it possibly can be, so you're serving your target audience and achieving your goals, whatever the goal, the why is for your book. There, you can have a team to help you do that. You don't have to do this all by yourself.
I love that. And oh my gosh, I think you're so right about the stories we tell ourselves from childhood. And I was actually listening to Amy Porterfield's podcast yesterday, and she had a guest speaker on who was talking literally about that. It's about rewriting the stories that we tell ourselves in our heads, in our minds, because they are things that we've grown up with. So, yeah, but you're so right as well with imposter syndrome and getting the editor. And let's say, Susan, with people who decide to self-publish on Amazon, what kind of pitfalls do you see there? Or if they go down that route, or can you just tell us a bit more about that sort of pathway to getting published?
Sure. Amazon is the most direct way to get published. So we have the traditional publishing model at one end, and at the very other end of the spectrum is going straight to Amazon, which is way more direct, faster. There are no barriers to entry. If you can get your book up on Amazon, you can become a published author. I think what isn't talked about a lot is that there is a quality issue there as well, and there's a learning curve. It's complicated. It's once you know what you're doing, it's not complicated, but that learning how to put your book up on Amazon can be very complicated. And in order to get the best quality publication that you can possibly get, it might be worthwhile to hire somebody who does this for a living to help you. So that is a cost. I'd like to talk about costs a little bit too, Deidre, because of the digital revolution, we all have this perception that it's free. Going straight to Amazon, it doesn't have to cost you anything. But in reality, to end up with a professional looking quality book, you probably should have someone who knows what they're doing do that. So you're ending up hiring someone. Also, you probably might want to hire someone who, as a profession, formats books. We've all picked up a book and not noticed how the interior of the book looks. But a really well laid out book is a beautiful thing. And that relates to the font that's used and the size of the margins and the chapter titles and the pages at the bottom, the page numbers at the bottom. There are a lot of little details that go into formatting a book that can make it look much nicer than something I could do, because I'm not a book formatter. I wouldn't want to format my own book because it's a skill. So you probably want to hire a formatter. For sure, you want to get the book edited. So there's a cost related to the editing. There's virtually no cost to the publishing with Amazon, but you're going to want to do some marketing around your book, presumably, but depending on what your why is. So if it's really a legacy book and you're doing this to tell family members about a family story, an ancestry story, then maybe you don't want to do a lot of marketing around that. But if it's supporting your business, then maybe you want to get that calling card out there in big ways, which requires a marketing plan. And if you're not hiring someone such as Deidre to help you with your marketing strategy that relates to your business, so they're aligned, then you're going to spend a lot of time, which has a dollar value attached to it too. So it's actually quite a strategic thing to do. So back to Amazon, although it is fairly straightforward once you know what you're doing, there's a big learning curve attached. There are a lot of details. And if you want a highly professional result, you probably should hire somebody who does this, who knows how to make it look good.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're so right. And I think it's a little bit that formatting bit often gets overlooked, and not just with books, Susan. Like with websites as well. This is, as you were saying, the fonts, the margins, the chapter titles. In my brain, I went straight to your brand fonts that you use for social media on your website. And perhaps it could be the same font
Yeah.
that you carry through in your book, so that you keep your
Ooh.
brand fonts all aligned. And that gets me excited. But
Oh,
equally,
that's a great idea. Yeah, I love that.
equally with margins, it's the same on your website. The more white space you have on the website, the more luxurious your website can feel. and so that's the margins, the padding on either side of your text on your website. And the chapter titles are a little bit like headlines that you might have in a magazine, or, something that's intriguing or interesting that is going to make people really want to dive in. It's the same with websites. So yeah, my brain instantly went to websites as you started talking through that.
Oh, there's so much similarity between writing a book and creating a brand. They really are aligned. And depending on the content of the book, of course, not everybody wants to write a book to support a business. But yeah, I love design. I'm just, it's not something that I do. I'm fairly visual. However, I don't have a skill set around visuals and graphic design. And it's so important how that book hits you. The book cover design, there's another issue. You want to hire, if you're self-publishing, you want to hire a book cover designer for you, and not just your highly tech-oriented visual arts student in college who is a family member. Like visual design is a highly sophisticated skill, and people spend years training to get good at what they do. There's a lot of psychology involved in graphic design. And same with your book cover. There's a lot of psychology involved in your book cover, and you want to have someone in charge of that who knows what they're doing, who understands the impact of color and fonts, as Deidre was talking about. What impact do fonts have on the reader? So yeah, it's pretty sophisticated stuff, and not something that I would, for me, would leave to an amateur. You want to hire the best quality designer that you can for your website too. Like you pay for it. It's important to pay for it.
Yeah, and like you say there, and you touched on it earlier, that quality piece can come through in how it feels, like how the cover and the psychology behind the colors and the book can create a feeling or an emotion in someone when they see it. Or, even if it's digital, they still probably going to get that sense, right?
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah.
It's so important. Well, even on an Amazon landing page, people do a search, find your book, and you're in a lineup with 6 or 7 other books on the page, on the screen. Well, does yours stand out?
Yeah. Yeah. And it has to stand out. It has to be something that's so compelling and irresistible that people just feel they can't leave it behind. So
Yeah.
on that, I've got 2 more things that you've touched on that I want to ask you about as well. And I know, okay, we may be talking a little bit longer than anticipated, but you're giving
That's
us
okay.
so much value, Susan. Thank you so, so much. So 2 things I want to talk to you about. You mentioned AI earlier. So I want to ask you about that because I recently released a podcast episode or earlier this year about ChatGPT and how you can use ChatGPT to enhance your results and enhance the content you create and drive results. So tell us a little bit more about that AI piece that you mentioned from the conference you did in London last weekend.
Oh, it's very exciting. It is pretty simple. We on our workshop we looked at ChatGPT, and we looked at QuickWrite, which is another AI program specifically for book writing, although you can do blogs and that kind of thing with it as well. But it's very straightforward to enter prompts into the AI program. So, for example, in book writing, what are the 10 topics, for example, that you want to cover in your book? And most entrepreneurs can come up with 10 problems that their ideal clients struggle with, which is great for a chapter. So you can put that into the AI, and it will come up with chapter titles for you. And furthermore, you can drill down for each chapter title and ask the book to, write a summary of what that chapter might be about. And then drill down again. It can do 800 words or more. I think ChatGPT is more limited than QuickWrite in the number of words that it'll generate for you, but it will generate the content for you. Now, the limitation is it's very impersonal. The writing is reasonably good. I can't complain of the writing. It's simple. It's not sophisticated writing, but that's okay, depending on who your target audience is. Again, if it's an academic audience, it probably isn't going to do the job, but it does do the job, but it's a starting point. It's not the finished product. Your AI content still needs to be customized for you. They don't do stories. That's the thing. Fiction, they can come up with some stories, but I think specifically for a nonfiction book, I like to see anecdotes, case studies, little things that the author has encountered in their business. That's not going to be in the chapter, say, that an AI platform generates for you. And there's no emotional content. And I think in my model of the world, people are struggling with things. And if you don't reference that you understand the pain that they're in, then you're missing an opportunity to provide credibility for you, but also to help them to actually solve the problem. So there are some big limitations. One of the things that came up in our workshop was this question of plagiarism. Is it plagiarizing things? And not really that we can figure out. But Grammarly Pro, if anybody has Grammarly Pro, it has an option where you can do a plagiarism check for that. And so, that is helpful as well. But it's very exciting, but it is also very limited. I would not write an entire book with AI. I'm starting to play with it myself a little bit for this next book to understand more about the limitations and how it can help me and my clients. But yeah, I think there's some interesting possibilities there, especially if writing is hard for you, that getting started is hard for you. I think it can be a really good start, but it's pretty flat emotionally.
And that makes total sense because at the end of the day, AI is artificial intelligence. It's based on logic and data that it's scanned and collected from the internet. It's crawled the internet and picked up data, but it has collected data. It's not a creature of emotion, it's a creature of logic. And so, yeah, that's a really great point. Empathy, it's completely lacking in empathy. And I think you're right in terms of relatability and credibility. It has to be authentic, and the stories you share and tell have to have that authenticity. That makes total sense. And I love that you mentioned Grammarly. I use Grammarly in everything that I create. So whether it's an email or a social media post or a blog post or even the chapter in the book that I wrote, I use Grammarly Pro. And I will share a link to that in the show notes as well so that people can check it out if you don't have it, because it's an incredible tool. Okay, Susan, thanks for covering that. And I can't wait to hear more about your book and the AI factor, how that's factored into it is really interesting. And so the final thing I just want to ask you about and learn more wisdom from you about is that marketing plan that you mentioned. And I'd love to learn more about the marketing plans that you've seen that have worked really well for people, be it traditionally published or non-traditionally published. What's worked, what's not, and what do you recommend right now?
Oh, well, that's a great question. There is an unlimited amount of money you can spend on book marketing, and there are an unlimited number of opportunities for marketing your book. And so let's go back to your why and be very clear on why you're doing this. And that helps cut through the clutter a little bit so that you know where you are best served in your marketing initiatives. What they're saying these days is that podcasting opportunities are one of the best ways of sharing message about your book. That seems to be a really successful one. And blogging, oddly enough, is highly successful. So blog about your book. And for that, you need a website. So, if you don't have a website already for your business, then I highly recommend that you do get a website. For my first book, I was so excited to get that first book out. And I already had a business website. And because the book was a novel, it didn't really support my business. So I had a whole new website developed around the book. So the theme was entirely dedicated to the book. Never in a million years did I think I was going to write another book. Then comes along book number 2. I have my business website and I have a website about my first book. And I could not repurpose that author website into a website that supported my book. So if you're going to invest in a website, perhaps it makes most sense to put a page on your existing website rather than create a whole new website just for your authoring activities. I learned that the hard way. But definitely you want to have an online presence for the book that talks about you as the author and talks about the book and the advantages of the book. Amazon, people think that Amazon is a great place to market your book, and it could be. But I think what most of the people that I've talked to have discovered is that you need to be really strategic with Amazon, and you need to be highly active in what you're doing there. You can pay for advertising, Google ads and Facebook ads. I don't recommend that for anybody unless you really know what you're doing and have a lot of money to throw at it. So I wouldn't recommend paid advertising. Certainly podcasting and blogging are two of the leading ones. There is a publication called BookBub that apparently is seeing a lot of success for people around their book. TikTok's been in the news in Canada lately as being not so popular with a lot of people, but there's Book Talk on TikTok that some people are having really great results with. I'm not personally there. I a different why for my books than selling a lot of books, but that's a good idea. I think publicity is very helpful for your business. I don't know anybody who has sold a lot of books as a result of their publicity initiatives specifically. So publicity is press releases, it's being on TV and radio, traditional TV and radio, typically traditional newspapers, news apps. It's great because it's indexable. So usually from a search engine perspective, you get some good bump from that. But from a book sales perspective, it doesn't seem to be working really well for people. So, and it's very expensive. So that's not where I would put my marketing dollars. My time and money for books related to books is really as well on podcasting and blogging. And we do social media quite a bit too. That seems to be a pretty good initiative as well. And you can spend as much money as you have on book marketing. Now, if we can turn the prism a little bit, there are also opportunities for book sales by leveraging larger organizations. And I know a few people who've done this where their book is aligned with a cause, for example, or a corporation that has money available to sponsor a cause, which might be mental health related, for example, children's causes, children's charities, and things like that. If you can reach a larger corporation and say, look, if you folks buy 50,000 copies of my book to give out to your clients, I'll put your logo on one of the front pages of my books and a little line that says sponsored by. And then suddenly you sell 50,000 copies or even 10,000 copies of your book. That's a good number. But it requires some legwork to uncover the organizations that are aligned with what you're doing. So
Yeah, but that
those are
comes
some
back
ideas.
to your who, right? It comes back to who is your target audience. So those tips at the start are really valuable. And yeah, several times with nearly every question I asked you, it came back to what's your why. So that is the key to all of this based on that conversation. Susan, you have been incredible. Thank you so much for giving all of that value and information. What's coming up for you? What's your next book? And I'm going to share where people can find you in the show notes, but tell us more. What's coming up for you? What's this next book?
Oh, well, I've got so much going on. It's very exciting. It's so funny. I've written a novel, a collection of short stories, a book about how to write well, a book about content marketing, which is a services my business offered for quite a number of years, and a book about, it was a co-authored book with a client on how you create an offline network, a person-to-person network, and support them with your online content. So 5 books, and I've been working as a book coach and an editor for years and have never written a book about how to write a book. So that's what I'm working on now. My 6th book is a book about how to write a book. And through that, I'm weaving my own memoir. That story of a 13-year journey to publication with that first book was full of self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all the things my clients struggle with. And I'm a professional writer. And so, but it is very much a love story. At the time, I was supported very much by my husband, who passed away, unfortunately, before that book was published. So I'd also like to honor his contribution to my career with that book because he was my biggest cheerleader. And anyway, it was a pretty hard road for me to get that book published. But once, of course, it was published, it's, lots more has happened as a result. It changed the trajectory of my entire life. And I think if I can offer any hope or inspiration to anybody, just lean in and do it. Do the best job that you can and trust that it will make a difference in your life and your business, and also in the lives of the people that you're here to serve. So it's just stick with it. Be committed, do the best job you can. If you need help, get help. But trust that if you've had that idea to write a book, that book is maybe meant to be written.
Amazing. Susan, thank you so, so much for joining us. It's been an incredible pleasure having you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deidre. What a joy to be here. I really appreciate the chance to be with you.
And there you have it, folks. In today's literary bonanza, we journeyed from CEOs to budding authors, exploring the essential ingredients for crafting your entrepreneurial masterpiece. We started with the all-important why and honing in on your message. You may have heard me say those before. Who your target audience is, and the importance of a good book structure. Then we addressed time management, we conquered imposter syndrome, and rewrote those childhood narratives we've been telling ourselves. Next, Susan emphasized the dynamic trio of graphic designer and editor and formatter to bring your book to life, so it has that quality and prestige, making sure that you're going to be proud to share it with the public and your target audience. And finally, Susan shared some of the marvelous wonders of AI in streamlining the writing process and unveiled a treasure trove of marketing strategies for your freshly minted bestseller. So, fellow boss authors, let's get writing. A huge thank you to the remarkable Susan Crossman for sharing her book writing brilliance with us today. I hope you are feeling inspired to embark on your own literary journey from CEO to author extraordinaire. Why not? If you've been tapped on that shoulder, as Susan said, or felt that book just calling out to you, it's time. It's the right time right now. But until next time, keep mastering your business and penning those page turners.